Hello and welcome back to my channel. If you are pregnant and really trying to start thinking about how life might look immediately after birth in that postpartum period and how you can really plan for and optimize your healing and that transition to being a mama, whether it's being a mama the first time or being a mama again, I think this is the video for you. And these are the things that I hope to do, this being my third baby. I've got a bonus daughter, Jess, who is 12. I've got Atticus, who is 4. And I've got Archer, who is 2.5. And we are expecting another baby at the end of summer. And so in my experiences, both in my own healing journeys, but also in supporting other mamas as a birth worker, as a nurse, as a lactation consultant, but also as a postpartum doula, I have seen the things that help and the things that really help us to feel nourished and supported and have an easeful postpartum journey versus those things that have really stopped the healing process, that have really put things on a pause and made things more difficult, made things more challenging. And so I have made a whopper of a list of the things that I'm going to do differently. So I thought I would just maybe take a moment and tell you how I did manage my other 2 postpartums and how I plan on not doing that again. With my first, I did very little in terms of support. I did very little in terms of the expectations that I placed on myself. I was very much like, okay, so I've just given birth, so I need to have visitors over, people want to meet the baby. I was already up and cooking and trying to clean the house and trying to look presentable. I was already out walking and exercising, and I was still bleeding. I remember being in the gym and still wearing a pad. So that is what you don't do. That is what you don't do, because it can hinder your healing. We have spent 9 months or more growing these little humans, and then we are left with, this beautiful wound on the inside where our placenta has come away. We are encouraging our uterus to, shrink and grow back down to size and come back into the pelvis again. We are trying to figure out breastfeeding. We are trying to figure out our new rhythms and routines and get to know this little person. And trying to do anything else on top of that is just way too much. And particularly, I think, for the more children you have, I feel like we need to prioritize this more, because our body needs a little bit more time just to rest and recover and recuperate. But also, for our other children, if we do have any spare energy or time, we should be placing our efforts with them, in maintaining our relationships with them, in supporting them in this new transition, as well as they become a sibling yet again, or a sibling for the first time, an older sibling for the first time. So I did an awful job with my first baby, and at that point I had already done my nursing training, my midwifery training. I was already working as a postpartum doula. But for myself, I think it made me, instead of going inwards and thinking about, well, what does Kitty really need, I placed higher expectations on myself to be up and out, which really I'm realizing it should have been the opposite. It should have made me realize just how much I needed to close the doors, go inward, mind myself. And to be fair, I was okay. I didn't ever struggle with any mental health issues. I never struggled with issues regarding how I felt about my body postnatally, any healing issues. I had no tearing, but I healed very nicely down below. But I think that's just sheer luck because of how hard I was pushing myself. So with my second baby, I was sort of planned to do things differently. We had a meal train for, I think, a week, maybe even 2, if I'm remembering correctly, from this sort of mama group of friends who I had built in those few years since having Atticus. And then we did do some bits and pieces that I had put in the freezer. So we did that. We did not have any external support. We had 0 family support at this particular time. And we did have a friend come and take Atticus for one morning for a play in the forest. But really, that was kind of it. I did do my best to rest. I stayed at home. I stayed in bed for the first week, and then I stayed at home for the first like month, really. I didn't go out. We did go for like a little walk around the area when I was maybe 2-3 weeks postpartum, but and I did do a lot of work on like my breath work, a lot of sort of exercises to reconnect with my pelvic floor and that sort of self-care. But I was back working. I think I took my first lactation client. Bear in mind, this is the height of COVID, but it was over Zoom. I would say a week after Archer was born. I also filmed and recorded and filmed his birth story less than a week postpartum. I was on Instagram sharing the experience less than 24 hours after he was born. I put up a post while I was in early labor. And for me, I think early labor is different. I think, you know, distraction can actually be a really beautiful way of managing your surges. But postnatally, when I should have just been engaging with my little one, I was so focused on this could be a really cute post, which is so sad. And I also didn't nourish myself as well as I could have. I was very aware of how much I was eating, considering I wasn't moving and getting into my like having previously had an eating disorder, which I feel like never really fully leaves you. That was in my mind. So I did not do things the way that I hoped to do them this time. And so I've been doing a lot more research. I've been really diving into traditional cultures around the world and how they do postpartum. Why is it that they do it that way? And how can I really lean into the rest and recovery this time and think about like future Kitty? What is going to make things easier for future Kitty? And for me, this means planning from now. So I have a free postpartum planning guide, which I will leave in the link down below. And some of these things are in it and some of them are not. But for me, this list isn't like your typical list. These are things that are going to make parenting easier. They're going to make things easier from not only the first few weeks recovery, but also like the longer term. So I'm just going to get straight into it. The first thing that I'm going to do, and I think I did do this differently with Archer, but I want to do it in a more intentional way this time, is instead of having like a baby shower or a sprinkle as they do with like subsequent babies, I did a mother's blessing. Everyone brought food. I actually didn't plan this last time. It was like a surprise. My friend Paige planned it and she hosted the whole thing. But everyone brought food, and anything that was left over, I brought home with me and I put in the freezer. So this, the idea of like a mother's blessing is that it's the focus is on you and how, you know, it's sort of creating ceremony around welcoming another baby, but also becoming a mumma again, and how your friends can hold space and support you in welcoming another baby, in welcoming you in stepping into motherhood again. And it's something that I've become more and more passionate about, in realizing the importance of it and how trivial and superficial and yes, maybe fun and fluffy and sparkly, but these baby showers can be. You know, we end up with how many plastic toys and how many onesies that our babies are never going to wear. So excuse me, I'm still a bit sniffly from a cold. But that's certainly one of the things that I'm going to do differently. So we're going to do a mother's blessing, a blessing way again. Hopefully Paige will host it again. She's just moved house, so it might be a little bit more tricky for her. And then if it's not, you're not into like maybe the more spiritual aspect of it, maybe you're not into like the hippie crunchy granola way of doing things, and that sounds just like too much, consider doing a nesting party. So you can still have like the fun drinks and the fun food and the chats and maybe the games, but you're also getting someone to organize the baby's closet, to maybe fold some of the laundry, to organize the diapers out in order of age. Maybe they are putting together some of the cloth nappies. Maybe they're putting together like a pumping trolley if you plan on pumping, or cleaning your pumping stuff so that it's ready to go, or getting a little postpartum basket ready for you, maybe some one-handed snacks, so that you aren't doing those things by yourself and you have an opportunity to come together with your girlfriends. Just an idea. I would love to see people doing this more. I feel like that was a really lovely way of supporting new mamas. The next thing is a meal train, and we did this last time, but I encourage everyone to do this. If you don't already have a close group of friends who know this drill and will set up a meal train for you just without even thinking about it, start doing it for them. When they have their babies, organize the people around you who would be happy to drop meals to them. Set the day, so you have like Monday, Sarah is coming, Tuesday, Louise is coming, Wednesday, so-and-so is coming. Make sure and put in whatever their food things that they do and don't eat, if they are gluten-free, if they are dairy-free or whatever, so that you're not bringing something that they can't eat. And also it can be helpful to be aware of the whole family. So not just bringing enough for one person. You are bringing the whole meal, enough to feed everybody. So a whole pot of soup, and instead of just a pot of soup, you're thinking, what would I have this soup with? Am I bringing bread? Am I also bringing butter? Am I bringing over actually like a breakfast meal? And instead of just the granola, bringing over maybe the yogurt and some honey and some fresh fruit, so that you are making my mouth water so that you are really feeding their cup, filling their cup. And for me, I do this for every postpartum visit that I do in work, but also if I'm visiting a friend, I will text them ahead of time. So perhaps, you know, hey, I'm coming to drop a meal to you tomorrow. Are you having any cravings, and is there anything you need? And sometimes they will need some diapers. Sometimes they will need more pads. Sometimes they are just really craving like fresh fruit or salmon. And so that can be a really helpful thing to just like check in with them on that before you start cooking something in particular. We also in our group will like add in what we brought, so they're not getting lasagna like 10 days in a row. But for me, I wanted to mention that because I felt like if you aren't already doing that in your friend group, you could be the one to start that. Set things up for success your way. The next thing that I'm going to be doing along the lines of meals is getting a deep freezer. So we already have just like a normal sized small freezer, which last time I filled to the brim and that was gone like really quickly. This time round we are going to invest in just a small sized chest freezer, and I'm going to start early with making warming, nourishing, easy to digest meals that are protein rich. We're thinking soups, broths, stews, dals, curries, tray bakes like lasagnas and shepherd's pie, and things that are going to be easy to just chuck in the oven, or like one pot meals that are going to be really easy, that maybe I'll even go ahead and write like the recipe or the instructions on, so that my husband doesn't have to think anything about. And even better if they don't have to have an accompaniment. So not like, okay, we have to put this in, but that also includes rice. So then my husband has to cook the rice or whatever. I would love for us to not have to cook for ideally the first month. And that might mean me looking into getting a meal delivery kit or service for the second half of that month, depending on how big of a chest freezer we get and how far we are carried with our meal train. But really, I think the best way that we can nourish ourselves postpartum is internally. We are massaging the internal organs. We are sending those beautiful nutrients to our body, to our tissues, to heal and to recover and to really fuel ourselves in postpartum, both in terms of healing but also like making milk, those sleepless nights and managing all of that stuff. I'm going to take a pause and drink some of my tea, which you don't need to hear me slurping. Gosh, it's so funny because I don't have the kids here at the moment. I so rarely get to drink hot tea, so I'm like, oh, that's sitting right there, I need to actually drink it. I'm also like so cozy in my husband's jumper in bed. I feel like I could easily just climb under the covers. Okay, so that was looking at the meals, and I suppose when we're looking at like the types of meals, we're thinking about like, you know, making those recipes out sooner rather than later, thinking about, yes, the meals themselves, but also like one-handed snacks if you're breastfeeding. I love to make ahead like bliss balls, or like those little you know, one-handed cookies or bites that you can either just pull straight out from the freezer and start munching on, or you can have cookies that are literally ready to go. You just need to throw them into the oven. So it's a really nice like easy, nourishing thing that everybody enjoys, and it's just a lovely thing to look forward to. For me, postpartum last time, I don't think I had any cravings, but I loved food. It was like my whole pregnancy, food was just like meh. And even now, I feel like I'm not that into food, even though my nausea has mostly eased. But I'm just not pushed. I have to like remind myself to eat. Whereas postpartum, as soon as I start to breastfeed that newborn baby, the hunger comes on, the thirst comes on. Okay, so the next thing that I wanted to talk about was the 5-5-5 rule. And if you haven't heard about this already, it is sort of a tradition that is carried out around the world in various different formats, ever so slightly different in terms of durations. But for me, I'm taking it really seriously this time. And that means 5 days in the bed, 5 days on the bed, 5 days around the bed. Am I saying that correctly? 5 days in the bed, 5 days around the bed, and 5 days like then down around the house. Yeah. So I'm hoping that I can extend this as long as possible, at the very least staying as rested as possible. My plan is also to make a cozy space where I can be downstairs. So for us last time, and actually you've continued this since then because we loved it so much, we got a sofa in our kitchen, because that's the hub of the home. That's where it's all happening. And I didn't like not being with the older children, but also seeing what was happening, seeing what was going on, being engaged, being involved. I was having FOMO, serious FOMO. So I made like a second bed essentially down the stairs. And for me that was fine because I had no tearing last time. But if you do have significant tearing, I would say try and stay in bed with your legs closed, just to really support that healing and happening as much as possible. Sideline feeding, staying off your bottom if you need to. Whereas for me, that wasn't an issue, so I could just move my bed downstairs, essentially, for the daytime so that I could be in and around with the kids and reading to them and snuggling up with them and being involved in whatever it was they were up to, even just like watching them play. Okay, what's up? What's next? Preparing the kids. So this looks like so many different ways. I have a whole entire video on preparing for the arrival of a sibling and making that transition gentler. I will link that video down below as well. But for me, this comes in two ways in terms of birth preparation. I do a lot of birth preparation with my kids. I have my babies at home, and so watching birth videos, reading books about home birth, which are, you know, I'll maybe link my favorite ones down below, means that piece is much easier. You know, there's going to be a little bit of mess. Mummy's going to make lots of funny noises so they don't get a fright when it does happen. And my kids have really loved being there and gotten really excited about watching that happen. And actually, I would argue that that piece of watching baby arrive made the transition easier, because it wasn't like, oh, bam, they were just handed a little child and where did this baby even come from? I wasn't ready for that. They were there while it all happened and unfolded. So books, videos, and then expectations. For me, I think it's really important, particularly with my now 4-year-old and with my 12-year-old, to be really clear that like we're having this other little baby and none of that is your responsibility. You don't have to, you know, my job in choosing to bring another baby into the world is to mind them, to feed them, to change their nappies, to bathe them, to look after them. You don't have to do any of that. You still should just be a kid. And I think there's a difference between an expectation being placed. So for instance, my 12-year-old likes to be in and around the little ones. And so if I needed to pop off and have a pee, she would quite happily sit and watch the baby or hold the baby. But I'm really clear in like, this is not her responsibility. There is no expectation placed on her to do that. It's something that if she wants to do, she can. And I'm really like clear about that. I'm really like, you're a kid, your job is to have fun. Your job is to be a kid. So that's huge. And then, you know, filling up their cup as well. And this is obviously something that looks different the more children you have and the different personalities of your kids, but preparing them in terms of knowing what makes them feel seen and heard. My current youngest loves to do the cooking with me. So I took back out our stander. He used to just come and like stand on a chair beside me. I got our stander out and he comes and he stands beside me and helps me prepare every single meal. If I'm doing something, he wants to be in the kitchen with me. He also loves to sit and do like coloring and drawing, and so part of my postpartum basket is to have some bits and pieces that I can do with my kiddos while I'm resting from bed. And so that's going to be like coloring sheets, felt, puzzles, things like that. And I will try my best and link that down below as well. I've got a whole like series for you. I'm aware of how long this video is getting. And then for my oldest, he loves to read. He would sit in bed and read with me all day, every day. And so taking out like having maybe certain books that we have bought just for that occasion. We're really into chapter books at the moment, so having some that he hasn't yet read that we can get excited about reading together from the comfort of our bed, knowing that this is going to fill up his cup, is huge. So being aware of what fills up their cups, and you know, while the baby is sleeping. For me, the first 6 months are generally the easiest because I pretty much just wear them in the wrap all day, every day. They come out for a little bit of kick around time when they're having their diaper changed, and then we co-sleep. And so really it's just like an extension of me. And I've also figured out back wearing the last pregnancy. So for a lot of the time it's like the baby's not even there. It's just in that real rest period, and in knowing that like I have to take a pause and feed the baby. That's hard. So placing the expectations, learning how you can, and just really leaning into being detective on how you can fill up their cup. That's going to be something that I'm leaning into more this time. And then I suppose one of the things I didn't do last time was planning for bedtimes. So I ended up leaning into solo bedtime quite quickly, or I did not lean into anything. I had no choice because Pete went back to work really fast. This time he is in college, so it's a whole different layer of busyness for me because I'm the solo earner in the family. But he will be home for bedtime every night, which is wonderful. But so last time I was doing solo bedtime, I had to figure out how that looked. And this time round, I've made a plan that I can still get almost like 2-on-1 time with the older two, because I can do what I do now, which is just snuggle them both to sleep. And they get that mama time, they get the closeness without there being a baby in the way. So the plan is that I would feed the baby, nurse the baby, and then the baby would stay downstairs with daddy while I put the other two to bed. We'll see how that goes. I don't know. But looking at how that's going to be for you can be really important. And I think it's so important that our little kids don't feel like there's a baby there in the way all of the time. Maybe that's just me. I don't know. Okay, I'm not even halfway through this. I think I'm going to have to break this into a part 2 because I've got so many things I need to cover still. Okay, part 2 coming up.